Welcome back to Brands Hatch, everybody. Our second and final Focus Cup Championship race of the day coming up. The cars are already on their formation lap. They've literally come straight out of the assembly area, straight onto the grid, and immediately onto the formation lap. So we very quickly had better rattle you through the way that they line up for this second race of the day. Each group of 6 places are reversed for the second race of the day, which means if you win, you start 6th. If you finish 7th, you start 12th, and so on and so on. So let's guide you through the grid then, and the way that they line up following round 3 of the championship that took place earlier on today. Simon Watts starts from pole position in this race, and alongside him is Ian Graham. It's Paul Taylor and Jonathan Baker that line up on row number 2. Ian Mitchell, who finished 2nd earlier on today, starts in 5th place, and the winner, of course, Lewis Clark, starts from 6th. Then on the 4th row of the grid, it's Gary Mitchell, who has got Sarah Hall for company. Row 5 of the grid sees Richard Davis line up alongside Simon Waugh. And then row 6 of the grid, it's Jonathan Ogden and Chris Broad that line up there on the 6th row of the grid. And Simon Walton in the development car once again has opted to start from the tail end of the field. He might have finished 5th on the road earlier on today, but of course he's developing, if you didn't join us earlier on, this Mark 3.5 petrol engined car, the 300 brake horsepower car, to introduce it into the championship for next year. So he's up against all the diesel engine cars and is going to start off the back of the grid. Our champion for this year, it's well worth mentioning, whoever wins the championship for this year will get to drive that car free of charge in the 2025 championship season. So it's a brilliant prize that's been put up for grabs by Simon Walton and the Focus Cup team, as they will have a split grid of cars for next year. They'll have the petrol engine class, which is for that car there, as he builds more of them over the winter, and the existing diesel engined cars will continue in the 2025 championship season. So let's see how they get on. Lewis Clark, remember last time, not only set pole position, he claimed the win and he set the fastest lap. He did that in both of the races at Donington Park, so he came away with absolutely the maximum number of championship points he could come away with from Donington Park. And so far this weekend, he set pole position for the race earlier on in qualifying. He won it and he set the fastest lap. So again, he is as yet to drop a single championship point out of everything that's been available so far this year. And if he were to win this race from 6th on the grid and set the fastest lap, he will have equalled what he's done at Donington Park, and in other words, scooped up every championship point that is absolutely available to him. So this race, again, as we saw the race earlier on, was originally scheduled to be a 15-minute race. Because of the time pressures that we've got placed upon us, it is going to be a 12-minute race. The lights are ready to be turned on the gantry. The orange and white car with its blue flashes of Simon Watts sitting there on pole position. The green car of Ian Graham alongside. It's the Power Max liveried car of Paul Taylor that sits there on row number 2 alongside the blue car of Jonathan Baker. And then you can see that it is now blackened. It's a change of car for Ian Mitchell. It's black and white and orange on now that 3rd row of the grid. And alongside him is going to be Lewis Clark. Gary Mitchell is missing by the look of things on the 4th row of the grid. Lights go out and we get things away and racing. A poor start from Simon Watts, who's away slowly. Brilliant start from Ian Graham, who's going to pick up the lead of the race. Jonathan Baker was not too slowly away, but Simon Watts, the man from pole position, just whatever happened, didn't really get the start that he wanted. And it will be Ian Graham that will lead the way at the wheel of the number 27 car as they head up towards Druids for the first time. You can see in the background the number 1 car with its pink flashes of Lewis Clark weaving around to see if he can make early inroads. Simon Watts sideways round through Druids. The cold rear Nankang tyres just reminding him that grip is at a premium in the early stages of this one. Paul Taylor in 3rd under pressure from the number 10 car of Jonathan Baker. And the race 1 winner, Lewis Clark, I think has dropped from 6th, possibly down into 7th. Has he? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, possibly 7th. Yeah, I don't quite think he's going to end up in 7th because Richard Davis isn't quite going to be able to make his way through. So Lewis Clark in full attack mode, draws himself alongside the pole sitter Simon Watts, who's gone a little bit backwards, hasn't he, since the start of this race. And this has really played into the hands of Ian Graham, who got that brilliant start from the outside of the front row of the grid and is starting to disappear up the road a little bit, having finished 6th earlier on today. That was what allowed him to start towards the sharp end of the order. And let's see what he might be able to do. So they work their way along the Derek Minter straight for the first time. The petrol engine car of Simon Walton that should have started off the back of the grid. He did exactly what he did in the race earlier on today, came into the pit lane and started from the pit lane, and is now tasked with trying to carve his way through the order whilst also not getting broiled in the main championship squabbles, for which there's a brilliant one going on for 2nd and 3rd at the moment. Jonathan Baker really applying the pressure to Paul Taylor, Jinks out from behind, does he? No, not quite, as they head in towards the braking area for Clearway's corner. Gary Mitchell in the number 81 AST backed car this time is feeling the pressure from Lewis Clark, who is desperate to try and get on terms with the front runners. Well, they're in 5th place at the moment. The first thing he needs to do is try and work his way through and past Ian Mitchell, who, remember, was runner-up in this championship last year, so he knows how to drive these cars. Very different way of driving the diesel engine car. You don't rev the guts out of the thing, you utilise all of that torque, which is much, much lower down in the rev band. Side by side for 2nd and 3rd, Paul Taylor and Jonathan Ogden still, Paul Taylor and Jonathan Baker still at it, as they head down in towards the braking area for Graham Hillbend. And all of the time, I think, Ian Mitchell starting to gain, followed by then also Lewis Clark starting to gain. Simon Watts, the pole sitter, still going backwards at this stage. The number 23 car has now lost a further place. He started the race from pole position. At the end of the first lap, he was down into 8th position. So really not been the best of opening laps for him. The petrol engine car, though, in the hands of Simon Walton, is making very good progress through the order. You see the slightly newer shape Ford Focus, the number 26 car, heading up towards Hawthorne Bend. He's directly behind Ian Mitchell now. And where is Simon Walton going to go through? He'll probably hold station down the Derek Minter Straight, so again he doesn't get overly involved in the main championship squabble. And we'll wait until, I would imagine, the exit of Stirling's, as he knows he's going to have another little attack on the run down in towards Dingle Dell. So through and past Ian Mitchell he goes. That's now going to put him up to, what's that, 4th place overall, Simon Walton, having started from the pit lane. So still for the lead of the race, it's Ian Graham that leads the way, from Paul Taylor, from Jonathan Baker. The top 3 absolutely together as they head underneath the vehicle bridge this time, ready to conclude lap number 2. Now, is anybody going to have an upper hand coming out of this corner? It's very difficult to try and gain an advantage on the way in towards Clearways. Your best bet is to try and concentrate on the exit of it and see whether you can get a tow coming over the start-finish line. And Simon Walton, I think, is potentially going to go through up into the lead of the race, is he? No, he edges alongside Paul Taylor. He's got Jonathan Baker also trying to sneak back up his inside as they go in towards Paddock Hill Bend. So Simon Walton just hangs on to it. Now we see attack for the lead, do we? No, not quite. Paul Taylor just making sure he covers off any attack that's coming from behind from Jonathan Baker. Lewis Clark, in the meantime, at the wheel of the number 1 car, the reigning champion, is now up into 5th position overall. And we'll look to see whether he can start to close in on the lead trio of cars, as Jonathan Baker has another little nibble to see whether he can dive up the inside of Paul Taylor. Has it worked this time? The answer is no. It's still the number 3 car there in 2nd place, with Jonathan Baker in the blue 10 car sitting there in 3rd position. And now Simon Walton utilising the extra horsepower he's got available at the wheel of the petrol engine development car to squeeze his way through into 2nd and ahead of Paul Taylor. I mentioned earlier on that once this petrol engine car is fully developed for the 2025 championship season, they're expecting it to be around about 5 seconds a lap quicker on the longer circuits compared to the current diesel engine configuration. Now Simon Walton's going for the overall lead, is he? Yes, he is. So through and ahead of Ian Graham he goes. So that now means we've got Simon Walton in the development car leading the way, who isn't going to score championship points. And now we've got 4 cars duking it out for the main championship scoring, which is going to be Ian Graham under pressure from Paul Baker, under pressure from Jonathan Baker, and then the reigning champion Lewis Clark weaving one way and weaving the other at the wheel of the car with the pink flashes to see whether he can do anything about getting himself onto the podium. Remember, he hasn't dropped a single championship point so far this year. 2 wheels on the grass as he tries to edge himself alongside Jonathan Baker. The door is prized open. Through goes the reigning champ and up into 3rd position now. Another place gained. That's now 23 championship points. And then very sideways ahead of him is Ian Graham, who saves the car from going into the gravel trap. I think there's a little bit of contact there potentially. You can see some marks down the side of the door. And now that means that Lewis Clark gains a further place. The reigning champ is now up into 2nd position. And if he can get through and ahead of Paul Taylor, that would get him back up into winning ways once more. So Paul Taylor leads the way. Ian Graham, who had been leading, by the time he'd recovered, he'd dropped back behind Simon Watts, so he was down into 8th place. He's back to 7th now, but has still got a chunk of work to do to try and catch that main pack that he was running with. 5.5 minutes in which to do it. Simon Walton, remember, leads the way, but isn't eligible for championship points. That car runs in an invitation class in reality, so the squabble for the championship points is for second backwards. And it may well be that Simon Walton decides to come into the pits potentially anyway towards the end of this race. Now, for the overall lead in reality, if we ignore Simon Walton for the purposes of this exercise at the moment, it's still Paul Taylor leading the way, but right with him is Lewis Clark, and Lewis Clark is not going to do anything on the run down in towards Dingle Dell. See the tail end of the car sliding around there as he pitched the car in towards the corner. Again, right on the coattails of Paul Taylor as they turn their way through the left-hander at Stirling's. Jonathan Baker's not that far away. Also, Ian Mitchell's not too far away as well. And then just off that is going to be Richard Avis as well. So around through the right-hander at Clearwell as they'll go. Can Lewis Clark do anything this time about stealing the lead of the race away in reality from Paul Taylor? So Simon Walton is leading, but he's not eligible for championship points. So this is in reality the battle for the lead of the race. Through the right-hander, Paul Taylor clings onto it. Can Lewis Clark get the overlap? He's just about, pries the door open and should have the run on the run up towards Druitt. And whilst the door is open, Jonathan Baker's going to try and squeeze his way through as well. So Lewis Clark leads the way. Is Jonathan Baker going to get through into second? No, Paul Taylor is having none of that. He'll then have the inside line as they head down in towards Graham Hill Bend. So Paul Taylor hangs on to second, doesn't drop to third, but it's still lead lost and place lost for him. Ian Mitchell still sitting there in what will be fifth place overall, but the fourth of these diesel engine cars in the train. And Simon Walton, who I thought might have headed to the pits as yet, is still just getting extra data and understanding this petrol engine car ever more, because he now leads by 7 seconds from the rest of the chasing pack at this stage. Ian Mitchell at the wheel of the number 81 car. So we saw him out in a differently liveried car, didn't we, in the race earlier on today. That's the one good thing about the Focus Cup, is that they bring spare cars, so all of the cars are prepared centrally, so if you have a problem with your main race car, you usually get the opportunity to drop into a spare one for the second of the two races. Paul Taylor still under pressure, still got Jonathan Baker right with him, Ian Mitchell not too far away, and Richard Avis is having a good run as well, didn't he? Had a difficult race number 1 when he got tagged into a spin when the lights went out and was pointing the wrong way on the start-finish line, but he's going well here. He's inside the top 6s, Richard Avis. Say, a man who's been in this championship every single year since its inaugural championship in 2019. So, right, Simon Walton dives to the pit lane this time through, so as expected, the race leader at the wheel of the development car comes in. So now we do have, for the lead of the race, Paul Taylor over the start-finish line, trying to hunt down the man who took the lead of the race away from him a couple of laps ago, Lewis Clark. Now, Lewis Clark, has he set the fastest lap of the diesel-engined cars? Because that, again, would suggest that he is trying to clean sweep everything. So he's just on a 1 minute 53.441. That is not quite as quick as Richard Avis has done. So at the moment, and Simon Moore has gone even quicker. He's in the 1 minute 52s in his car. So at the moment, Lewis Clark is leading the way, but isn't going to pick up the extra 5 championship points for the fastest lap by the look of things. And are we going to have a shuffle in the order? We are, because by the look of things, Jonathan Baker has just lost out there. The number 81 car of Ian Mitchell dives at the inside, takes the place away. And Jonathan Baker could lose a further place here, as he is now under pressure from Richard Avis at the wheel of the number 77 car, weaving one way, weaving the other, trying to get good momentum heading down in towards Hawthorne Bend, with 1 minute and 20 seconds remaining. So there is Richard Avis, been a fundamental part of this championship since 2019, when he, in the opening season of it, finished in 7th position. He bettered that, finished 5th back in 2020, and that still remains as his best finish in the season. He's finished 6th overall the last couple of years, trying to hunt down these 2 cars ahead, which is Jonathan Baker, who was 4th in the championship last year. He is ganging up on the man who was runner-up in the championship last year, which is Ian Mitchell. And these 3 cars, now that they're squabbling, are not going to catch the pair ahead, which is Lewis Clark and then Paul Taylor, cars number 1 and 3 respectively. So Ian Mitchell, having just gained a place over Jonathan Baker. Jonathan Baker is looking to try and return the favour here. He's looking very racy indeed as he comes up towards the start-finish line. But there's the 5-second penalty for car number 10. which is Jonathan Baker. He might be applying the pressure for Ian Mitchell, but 5 seconds are going to be added to his race time, which is going to drop him down through the order. So if we add 5 seconds to his race time, that is going to drop him just a single place at the moment. Just going to drop him behind Richard Avis, and is now ever more likely to drop him behind Richard Avis, because we've had a spin, and the spin is Ian Graham, who was almost got tangled up then with Jonathan Ogden, both of whom come to a halt. Both will get going, but that does at least take a bit of pressure off Jonathan Baker now, because he was 5 second penalty. You add 5 seconds to his time and he was just going to lose the one place. Well, now those cars that were not that far away from being within the 5 seconds of him have got tangled up and have slowed themselves up heading round through Druids, so that takes the pressure off him slightly. However, on the road, he is now potentially going to lose out to Richard Avis, who is weaving one way and the other with the clock already at 0. Richard Avis probably blissfully unaware that he doesn't need to overtake the car ahead of him, because it has picked up that time penalty. As we say, it will be 5 seconds that will be added to the overall race time of Jonathan Baker, so Richard Avis can afford to just hold station. Now, Lewis Clark is on for the win, his 4th out of 4, but he is not still at this stage on, I don't think, for the extra championship point. 5 championship points will be heading his way for the fastest lap, so unless he can do something on this lap, because the clock is at 0, they'll be heading towards a checkered flag for the first time this year. Lewis Clark is not going to take absolute maximum championship points over the course of a weekend, only because he's not set the fastest lap so far. So up towards the start-finish line. Can he do it on this lap? Let's wait and see as he heads over the start-finish line. And I don't think he does on that final lap. So Lewis Clark claims the win. In fact, he does go slightly quicker. He does a 1 minute 52.2. And does that give him the fastest lap of the race? Yes, it does. For the diesel-engine cars, it does, yeah. 1 minute 52.2 does mean that he does pick up the extra 5 championship points, which means he has done exactly what he did at Donington Park. He's fastest in qualifying, picks up the 30 championship points. He wins race 1, 30 points. He wins race 2, 30 points. He sets fastest lap in race 1, an extra 5. He sets fastest lap in race 2, an extra 5. A maximum, again, of 100 championship points, if I've got the maths right, will go the way of Lewis Clark, which is the best possible way to start his title defence for the 2024 Focus Cup Championship here at Brands Hatch. What can he do at Oulton Park, which is where we head to next time out for the Supercar Pageant meeting up there on the 29th of June, before they then go to Silverstone in the Grand Prix circuit, where they can really stretch their legs around there, can't they, on the 27th of July. Then it's up to Croft. That event won't be live streamed on the 24th of August. Donington Park on the Grand Prix circuit on the 14th of September, and then we'll conclude the season at Snetterton on the 300 circuit on the 5th of October. So there's plenty of racing still to come, and lots of championship points up for grabs. But for Lewis Clark, 4 races in, 2 race meetings in, absolute maximum championship points. Let's confirm the results for you then for round 4 of the 2024 Focus Cup Championship. Lewis Clark claims the win from Paul Taylor in 2nd place. 2.6 seconds adrift was Paul in the end, and Ian Mitchell was there in 3rd place. Good result for Richard Avis, his blessed of the season, as he finishes there in 4th place, with Jonathan Baker given a 5-second penalty. He drops to 5th. Simon Watts, the pole sitter, finishes in 6th place, ahead of the other Simon Waugh, who was there in 7th place. 8th place in the end, and an interesting race from Ian Graham. Then in 9th place, it was Jonathan Ogden, and it will be Gary Mitchell that will complete the top 10. Then, as we head to 11th position, Simon Walton was there in 11th place. 12th place went the way of the number 6 car of Broad, who finished there, Chris Broad, who finished in 12th position, and last of the finishers will be Sarah Hall, who finished just off the lead lap. So that's it from the Focus Cup, that's it from Brands Hatch. Join us next time out when we head to Cheshire and Oulton Park for a further 2 races, rounds 5 and 6 of the 2024 Focus Cup Championship. Goodbye.